Well, hello. It is our final session of the style sessions for the season. My name's Roger Mittag. I am the host of the style sessions. I'm the founder of Prud'homme Beer Certification and a small little company called Thirst for Knowledge, which deals with all kinds of beer education from certification programs to beer dinners to beer tastings. We do all kinds of things within the industry. Good day, my friend Harold. Amsterdam Framboise 2015, excellent. Ephemer Raspberry, wonderful. Blueberry Cherry. Oh my God, man, how big is your cellar? Those are great. Oh my, geez, Harold, that's crazy. Hello, Kathy. I'm sure you brought Dave with you. Hello, Daniel James. Oh my God, look at how do you manage to keep all that stuff, Harold? I would just want to drink it all. Gus is here as well. St. Ambroise apricot wheat, Muskoka plum, and boysenberry sour. That would be the ebb and flow. Gahan blueberry, nice, fruity. And you've got some help. Excellent. Yeah, really. We do want to see Harold's cellar at someday. We could actually have a big party there when it's allowed. Hey, Paul, strawberry blonde from Brock Street. Nice. I don't think I've ever had that one before. Hello, Joe. Craig, hello. Michelle. I don't think we've ever met Craig's wife, Michelle. This is nice. The only style of beer she enjoys. You have a fruity and a sawdust happy sauce. Okay, you'll have to tell me a little bit about happy sauce. I don't really know that at all. Hello, Marisa. Yeah, this is kind of a fun style category. I think more people are going to join us shortly. But we've sort of gone over a ton of different styles over the last year or so. Hi, Rebecca, Brian, and Callum. Nice to see you guys as well. Um, yeah, so we've done all these traditional styles, and sometimes you just run out of traditional styles, and so I think when we start this back up again, we'll have to start revisiting some of the less traditional styles and some of what people are making these days. Um, Not really sours, but we'll get into a whole bunch of different characteristics on different styles of beers as well. So tonight is about fruit beers. And, I really, really enjoy fruit beers, but I think a lot of it, not from growing up or not even early on in the days when I started enjoying beer because there really wasn't a lot of fruit beers back in those days. But I think I fell in love with fruit beers when I went to Belgium. Hello, Michael. Well, we got Lena, Daniel, and friends. There's a group from Waterloo, and they're all in on Michael's internet, so that's kind of cool. Yeah, I think this all started for me when we went to Belgium when I was with the Olin Specialty Beer Company in '97. Hello, John. You honestly, dude, you don't need to reintroduce yourself. I know you're Joe's brother. Um, so '97, I got hired by the Olin Specialty Beer Company, and that was September. And by November, they had taken us all over to Belgium to go train us. And, it seems like a really, really hard thing to do is go for 7 or 10 days and just drink beer and enjoy it and learn as much as you possibly can. But it was pretty tough. They tested us a lot. But I still remember, hello, Scotty. One of the things that will always sit in my memory is the day that we visited the Bellevue Brewery in Brussels. And Brussels is sort of the center of where Lambic Brewing is. And I'm going to talk about Lambic Brewing first, and then we'll get into some of the wheat beers. You guys are welcome to open yours. I'll show you what I'm going to drink tonight. Earlier on, I had the Gahan Blueberry. This is outstanding. I love this beer. I'm going to buy more of it in the future. Anne's got Kronenberg 1664 Fruit Rouge, which is elderberry and raspberry. I've got a Fruity here as well, strawberry. But the one I'm going to enjoy is the Saint Ambroise apricot wheat. Always been one of my favorites. I got a little bit of story for you on this one too. So I'm going to open that while I'm telling stories, because that's what we do here on the Style Sessions. We tell stories and we enjoy beer and friends from a distance, which is nice. So anyway, cheers. Oh my God, Harold, I would imagine that would make great waffles, yes. So I'll get into this beer in a bit. So November 97, we're in Brussels. It's one of the first places that we go, actually. We go to Bellevue before we go to Stella and Hoegaarden. But Brussels is centered, dead center, in the lambic brewing area. So lambic beers are a geographical protection that survive around a 15-kilometer square radius around Brussels. And lambic beers go back into early 1400s, 1438. And so it's very difficult to figure out where the word lambic comes from. Some people believe it comes from a town called Lambic, which is in that area. Lambic didn't have very much taxes, and brewers tended to go there to brew. They also think that it has something to do with the Spanish word lambicus, but we don't really know. But the thing about lambic beers is that they are spontaneously fermented. So what happens with a lambic beer is you brew it naturally, the way that we would do modern beers. And so brew it, mash it, lauter it, boil it, and then cool it down. And then when you finish cooling it, you transport it up into the top of the brewery, and you put it into these big open fermenting vessels called cool ships. And then they open all the doors and windows in the brewery, and they let the yeast come in naturally from the fields adjacent. It's a very natural way of brewing. It's probably a more traditional way of brewing than anybody's ever done in a long period of time. And this only happens in that 15 square kilometer radius. Then what they do is, these are really long fermentations. Fermentation really only happens between October and March. And the fermentations are excessively long. And then afterward, they age them in barrels anywhere from 6 months to 6 years. Very expensive beers to make, very complicated, very intricate. And the way you create consistency is by blending. And the very first lambic beer I ever had was Bellevue Creek, and Creek is a Flemish word for cherry. Still to this day, I can taste it. I know exactly what it smells like, exactly what it tastes like. It is an unbelievable beer, extremely complex. Scott, you're saying you're having a Saskatoon berry. Oh, neat. Really complex, a little bit of acidity, a little bit of sweetness. Oh, Dave and Kathy had a trip to Cantillon. Now, Cantillon is a lambic brewery as well, but they do a little bit more on the goose side. I think I've had maybe one of their framboises before. Cantillon is a very unique brewery. So, you're sitting in this brewery, and it's really kind of fascinating because you are accustomed in the beer industry to seeing really pristine breweries, and this brewery was not pristine at all. It was a little musty. It was a little dank. There was bugs everywhere. There were spiders everywhere. And the spiders serve a purpose because they eat the fruit flies, and fruit flies are obviously a bad thing for when you're brewing with fruit. And so it was just a fascinating visit, and I think I just fell in love with fruit beers at that time. So fast forward, we move into where we're at. Fruit beers, there wasn't really a ton of them when I started in the industry, and we really launched Bellevue Creek, and that sort of started everything. And now we can see every once in a while at the LCBO, we see Lindemans in there. We've seen Fruly in there as well. Lindemans is a really good lambic brewery as well as Cantillon. We don't see Bellevue Creek anymore because Interbrew decided that they didn't want to sell it in North America. Again, they're very expensive beers. But we didn't really see a ton of fruit beer. Now, then we start seeing things change. And when I started Thirst for Knowledge in 2005, I started seeing a little bit more fruit beers. So one of the beers Harold talked about earlier is his Amsterdam Framboise. Now, Amsterdam Framboise, absolutely one of my favorite fruit beers of all time. It's really, really deep and rich in raspberry. It almost tastes like, I don't know if anybody knows what Laura Secord jams used to taste like, but it almost reminded me of a Laura Secord raspberry jam. It was just that deep in flavor. And then a few more started popping up. Kawartha Lakes raspberries started, and then they were purchased by Amsterdam. And so Amsterdam had these two fruit beers. And then St. Ambroise apricot wheat has been around for a long period of time. The thing I like about this particular beer is, it's got the look of apricot, but when you smell it, it smells like, fresh peaches, fresh apricots. It's got this really nice stone fruit aromatic to it. You're a good man, Harold. But I think the thing that I love the most about this particular beer is it doesn't taste sweet. It's got a sweet nose, but it really doesn't taste sweet. It's actually quite easy to drink. It's got a little bit more of a bitter beer background to it. John is loving the Broadhead Blueberry Blonde. Now, that is an exceptional blonde beer with a little hint of blueberry in it. The Gahan, on the other hand, is a wheat beer, so it's got a little bit more texture, a little bit more density, a little bit more sweetness, and a little bit more blueberry to it as well. All of these beers are exceptional. They're all really, really well made. It's been a long time. I haven't really had any kind of fruit beers that aren't what I consider qualitative. So it just depends on what you want. Fruity, to me, is probably a little sweet for a fruit beer, but then it's made with 25% strawberry must. So that's fresh strawberries that are pressed and then added into this beer. Fruity's an interesting story. I'll give you a bit of background on it. So Belgian beer, not sold in Belgium. So this is a beer that is brewed under contract. The people that own the brand are English, and they've commissioned the Tremens brewery, so the Heuge brewery in Belgium, which makes delirium tremens, to brew this beer for them. And so this beer is typically sold for export in many, many other countries. At one point, Canada was the number one export country for Fruity. I don't know if that's still the case. It's a great beer. It's 4.1% ABV, which is alcohol by volume, for those of you who don't know. It's great in a really, really tall glass. So, this kind of a glass is great for Fruity. I think I actually have a Fruity glass here somewhere. Maybe not. Anyway, I digress. One of the things that you can see with Fruity is the guys at McClellan Premium Imports, they do something called Frulerium, and that's where they blend about a 50% delirium tremens and 50% Fruity into the same glass, and you get a little bit of fruitiness and a little bit of high octane, because delirium tremens is around 8.5% alcohol. Really cool. A few years ago, Kronenbourg came out with this one. So Kronenbourg Blanc is a Belgian wit beer, and it really smells like Five Alive to me. So it's got a real peachy kind of note to it. And then a few years ago, I was lucky to be involved in their launch of this beer into Canada, and this is called Fruit Rouge. And it's made with elderberry and raspberry. And the thing I like about this one is it's really vibrant on the red fruit nose, but it finishes really nice and clean and doesn't have a ton of sweetness left over. Harold, you're big on the pancakes and waffles, I'm going to have to say. So what we're seeing now is a lot of brewers that are adding fruit into their beers. Now and for it to qualify for a fruit beer for me, it needs to be the most dominant characteristic. So Muskoka does a really wonderful beer called Winterbeard, where they add cranberry into a stout, an imperial stout. Now, that doesn't qualify for me as a fruit beer, because the cranberry is a very, very subtle kind of characteristic, and it's more of the chocolate and the stout characteristics that are more dominating. So for me, fruit beers, the fruit has to be the dominating characteristic. No, that's a really good question. It's a little sweet and nice, but is it okay to mix it with something else? And nothing, there was a time when I believed that beer should be in its own glass and nothing else should accompany it. But that was back in the days when I was pretty strict on how beer should be consumed. I'm open for anything these days, anything that where people will go buy a beer and try something else. So for Anne's question, um, with Kronenberg Blanc, I would probably add that with a little bit of sparkling water. We've ordered this really nice sparkling water from the Spearhead Brewery called Aqua, and it's really wonderful. Spearhead's out in Kingston, and this has got a little bit of hop nose on it, more on the citrus side, but it's really, really excellent sparkling water if you want something from a local brewery that's not beer oriented. I would do that with that, and I think that would be a good thing. You could actually do orange juice with that as well and sort of make a beer mosa out of it, have something really fun. Um, so John's asking, I can always count on John when he comes in to start asking some really interesting brewing questions. Is the fruit being added fresh, frozen, or pure? Same process across most root beers. Innovation in fruits beyond raspberry. I agree. I think that there is a lot of opportunity to add different kinds of fruits into beers, and I think some brewers have done it. Some fruits lend themselves better than others. Blueberry is an interesting fruit to add. I'll deal with your question in a sec. You guys are asking the same question. Anne's asking like wine or soda, which is exactly it. Wine would be good with fruit blanc as well. Maybe a nice Pinot. Could almost make a sangria out of that. So let me get back to the fruits. Blueberry is really interesting. If you're not really careful with it, the blueberries will create a ton of color and body into the beer that you may not necessarily want there, which is why I think when you look at Gahan's Blueberry Ale or even Broadhead's Blueberry Blonde, they don't really have that reddish tone that you get from the blueberry skins. So primarily what they're doing is those guys are most likely adding an extract or a juice of some sort. And where they're typically adding it is most likely after fermentation, so into aging tanks. Normally speaking, you do not add fruit into the mash or the kettle because it metabolizes, and if you add it in both of those places, the extra sugars will change the dynamic of the alcohol content. So normally speaking, when fruit is added is typically at the end. It's normally in aging. And there are different ways of adding it. So the way John's asked it and Bess has asked is the same thing. So how do you do it? Well, totally depends. If you are Kronenberg, then you're finding extracts and flavoring ingredients that you're adding in. If you're Fruity, for example, then it's 25% pure strawberry pressed must that's being added into the aging tank. The blueberries, I'm assuming, are more extract. Same with Saint Ambroise. It's probably more of an extract that's being added. Now, if you are adding fruit into a lambic, historically speaking, lambic beers, creeks, cherries, we're using whole sour cherries, and then that's gradually changed because there's a lack of production in Europe on cherries, so now they're using cherry juice. When you're doing a framboise, which is raspberry, normally speaking, it's always the juice and never the whole raspberry. And one of the reasons that it's never the whole raspberry is because the little tiny seeds that are in a raspberry can often get stuck in the barrel. And if they get stuck in the barrel and carbonation happens, quite often what will happen is it'll blow the barrel apart. And so it's always really raspberry juice. Daniel and Waterloo team are asking, what are my thoughts on radlers? Would I count these as fruit beers? And the answer is no. The reason I don't count a radler as a fruit beer is because a radler was started in Bavaria by a particular restaurant. And I can't remember the name of the restaurant, but this guy was finding that a lot of cyclists were riding by his place every week. And when they came by, they would stop in and have a beer. So he was emptying out a beer on an ongoing basis. And then what he decided to do was add a little bit of grapefruit juice or lemonade into the beer and started calling these beers radlers because a rad is a bicycle and a radler is something made for a bicycle. So radlers are typically very, very low alcohol content, so typically under 3 or 4. And normally speaking, you would add lemonade or grapefruit juice to a radler. So I don't normally consider that to be a fruit beer. It's a radler. And radlers sort of live on their own as far as I'm concerned. I love radlers. I think they're great. They're really, really refreshing. But I don't really view them as a fruit beer at all. Sorry, lots of talking, not enough beer. These beers are amazing with food. One of the great things I think that people really don't get is that, and this goes back to Anne's point, like what could you have with this? What could you mix it? Because it's a bit sweet. But if you like hot foods, and you want to tone down some of those hot foods, so if you took spicy wings and actually had a Kronenberg Fruit Rouge or a Fruity with it, you would find an incredible pairing. What it does is it just sort of mellows out the spice a little bit more. It takes down some of the sweetness. It really makes the two things pop, and they're two complete different contrasts where you get all this sweetness and all this spiciness, and it just seems to work so well. They're great with vinaigrettes, so you can use them in a salad dressing. Obviously, you can use them with dessert, and as Harold said, with pancakes and waffles. These are amazing things. I took when I originally started Prud'homme and we started doing level 2 classes at Aphrodite Cooks, I had this recipe that I was loving, and it was an apricot chicken recipe, and I paired up the Saint Ambroise apricot with that, and then we actually paired it with some Moroccan rice, and it just seemed to go so well with chicken and the rice as well. Where are we? Fruit beer popsicles in the summer. Yeah, that would actually be really good. The problem with alcohol is that it freezes at a lower temperature than everything else. So you'd have to have a really good freezer, John. And but I think those would be excellent. You might want to keep them away from the kids, though. But really nice, good cold temperature, below -3 degrees, and you've got a good popsicle. Thus's question is, when do they add juice to a radler? And again, typically after fermentation, so more in aging. Yeah, thanks, Ann. Marisa, what did you have? You said that was yummy. Scotty, what do you... Canteen de Königlich Bayerischen Eisenbahn de Diesenhofen de Tavern. Okay, Scotty. Oh, all right. I know where you are. Scotty's telling us the origin of radlers. Perfect. Kids are over 19. Oh, yeah, well, exactly. So it's all good, right? Um, so yeah, lots of really cool stories about fruit beers. I think that we're going to see one. I'll tell you an interesting one. When we were being trained, we had a brewmaster. Oh, you said that was yummy. That's right. You were part of that. Yeah, Marisa was part of my level 2. We went back to the original recipe and we did the St. Ambrose apricot chicken. That's right. I have to tweak my memory. So anyway, back 97. We have a guy who's training us, and he's our brewmaster, and his name is Bill White. And Harold has met Bill before, so has Ann. Bill was just a really, really interesting guy. He was a character. He was a great storyteller. He had this huge mustache, and he was just one of the most passionate people I've ever met about beer, and I learned so much from him. But he used to tell us a story about lambic beers and about the origin of the fruit version of it. And there was a story going around Belgium that lambic beers weren't really part of the way things were or the fruit part of the lambic wasn't part of the way things were originally, and that there was a myth that some young boy who was trying to play a prank on one of his neighbors, because back in those days, if we go back in the Middle Ages, people would have brewed their own beers for their own purposes. It wouldn't have been something that was done commercially. And so Bill kept telling us that the belief was that a young boy was trying to play a prank on one of his neighbors, stuck a whole bunch of cherries into a beer, and that the people, when they ended up having the beer, absolutely loved it, and that sort of transformed how fruit was added into beer. Cherry stout from Bell's. Bell's a great brewery, and a raspberry stout. Yeah, those things, Vess is bringing up a good point, because what we're seeing, what Vess is talking about, is actually what we discuss in our beer and food pairings, and that is contrast. And contrast is the separation of two unique characteristics, like sweet and bitter. So when you're dealing with cherries and chocolate, and you put the two of them together into a bottle or a glass or a can, really, in essence, what you're doing is you're creating a Black Forest cake in a glass. And that's really one of the wonderful things about brewing, is that you can manipulate some of the ingredients to create these different flavors that you get after the combination. Joe's definition of a balanced diet. Oh, God. A lazy IPA, fruit beer in each hand. Not even close to being balanced. IPAs are not in balance. All right, I'll leave it up to you guys if you have any questions or comments. I think I'm out of stories, which is unique for me. As always, we really enjoy all of your participation, your comments, your questions. Anne's right. Make sure that you like it if you're feeling that way. Let other people know what we've done in the past. These are all posted on Prud'homme's YouTube channel, and they're there for anybody to use and share anytime that they want, or to learn a little bit more about different beer styles. If you've tuned in late with us, we've probably covered around 24 different beer styles over the last year, and it's been just a ton of fun. But we are going to take a little bit of a break. I'm starting to get a little busier on Monday nights, and spring season is coming up, and classrooms are going to begin again. I hope. I keep my fingers crossed. So we're going to take a little bit of a break. We may come back, like I said, with style sessions that are a little bit more specifically oriented to more New World styles. Yeah, I don't know, Ann. That's a really good question. I don't know when we're going to start up again. A lot will depend on timing, whether I'm in class or not, and whether or not we can conduct these from a third place in the world. I'd like to know which one of you said that. Yeah, no, that's not true at all. Thanks, though, from Daniel and the gang about that. No, a fruitcake is typically made with rum and raisins and those kind of things, so it doesn't really have much to do with fruit beer. Yeah, you know what? I'm really open to taking suggestions from anybody. If you guys, obviously the session is going to end soon, and not everybody's going to get their information into us. But if you want to contact me, you can email me at rmittag@thirstforknowledge.ca. You can find me on Instagram, on Facebook. Drop me a message and let me know what you would like me to look at or review with you when we come back to the style sessions. Best, you got to get through the rest of the week. Yeah, you can have one every day. Yeah, oh, Craig, I really wanted to understand that. Sawdust Happy Sauce is a framboise fruit beer. More on the tart side, especially chasing Fruity. Yeah, Fruity would be a lot sweeter. It would be interesting I'll have to look around for Sawdust Happy Sauce, because I've never really had a ton of their beers, but I'll check that one out, because I want to know how they made it. I always welcome, Harold. and I'm glad it's one of your favorite days. I'm looking forward to the day that we can get together and I can come visit your cellar and have some fun. Scotty, always, yeah, I'll hopefully see you soon. Scotty's one of my teachers, one of my instructors. Parsons Kilted Mouse. Awesome beer, interesting style. What the hell's that? Parsons is a great brewery out in Prince Edward County. They do some really cool things, and they've got a really great site. So if you're ever going out to Prince Edward County, they've got about 4 or 5 breweries out there. Really a neat place to go. I don't know what that is. I've had some of their other beers. Um, oh, rum barrels. Yeah, they do a lot of that. Sometimes I think that'll be one of the things that we do when we come back. I was thinking about that, about doing barrel aged beers, and because we can have a really good discussion about that. We'd start off with Innocent Gun and talk about how they sort of reinvented the wheel, and then get into some barrel aging that some of the other breweries have done. The thing about barrel aged beers is they typically are high alcohol and they can last a really really long period of time. The barrel is the important part of it. So rum barrels are pretty interesting. I don't know how it figures in with a kilted mouse, but people name their things weird. All right, so we're at that time, and unless you guys have any other questions, it's been a blast. Always love doing these things. Always love spending time with you, and thank you very, very much for tuning in. Make sure that you check out where Prud'homme Beer Certification is these days. Classes aren't probably really starting up until April. I think we've got one scheduled in March, but out in Cambridge. But in the general GTA, especially in Toronto, probably not until April, until things change a little bit. But I hope to see you all in the future. Cheers. Have a wonderful spring and summer, and we'll talk soon. Cheers. Oh, session on breweries. That's a really good idea. So I was going to say goodbye, but I can't because there's thoughts coming in. Different breweries. You know what? I like that. I really like that idea. And maybe we will feature some breweries. I think that we can do that really easy. Thank you, Kathy and Dave. Thank you from the Waterloo gang. All right, John. Cool. Nice seeing you as well. Annie, thank you. All of you have a great night. Enjoy beer. Love Ontario. Drink local. But don't forget that there's some amazing things coming from Europe. So